This video was written before it was confirmed that Ten Hag would be staying, so this is more general but it still translates to United at the moment. But we'll do a separate video specifically looking at who should be signed for Ten Hag's midfield. Joao Neves has a £104 million release clause in his contract. However, there have been reports, and by reports I mean I saw it on Twitter, that Manchester United have had a £51 million bid rejected for Neves, with Benfica reportedly wanting around £85 million, which is probably made up anyway, but if United were able to get Neves for a £20 million price reduction, it may be a deal that I would look to do. However, I think it would hinge on the future of Bruno Fernandes, but it also isn't just as simple as a yes or no answer, as it would depend on the availability of another central midfielder, who I am going to reveal in just a bit. But first, why would Neves be a player that I would consider replacing Bruno Fernandes with? Even though Neves isn't an advanced playmaker like Bruno, with the Benfica man being more of an all-action, deeper-lying midfielder, who provides control via his ball circulation in deeper areas of the pitch, rather than the incisive chance-creating ability of Fernandes. But before I get into that, if you like me are excited for the upcoming Euros, go over to Jersey FIFA, they've got all the Euro 2024 jerseys, as well as the retro club and international jerseys as well. A link will be in my Instagram bio, which I will leave linked in the description. So I think when replacing Bruno Fernandes, we shouldn't just go for a like for like, but instead look at how we can use his likely transfer fee of around £100 million, I would anticipate if he is moving to Saudi Arabia, to completely reconstruct United's midfield, creating the strongest midfield available. Yes, you could go for Wirtz or Musiala, but I can't see either moving to United this summer. And whilst I do rate the likes of Eze and Dani Olmo, I do think they are a level below Bruno Fernandes, specifically when it comes to chance creation. If I was creating a perfect central midfield for United, it would be a midfield passes and carries into the middle and the final third as well. Mainu already fits in perfectly, being capable of dropping deep in the build-up phase in either a single or double pivot, to the edge or inside his own box, whilst also having the athleticism, creativity and output in the final third to also be a significant creative threat higher up the pitch. So who are the two players that I'd bring in to partner him? Well, whilst I would love Joao Neves, my first two options would be Ezekiel Palacios from Bayer Leverkusen and a player from a Premier League rival who, due to FFP, could be available this summer. Now, I have got a whole analysis video out on Ezekiel Palacios, so I'll leave that link below so you can see just how good he is, but why do I prefer him to Joao Neves? Well, for me, Palacios is stylistically different enough to both Neves and Mainu to provide United with more balance, and signing Neves ahead of him would. See, both Mainu and Neves excel when it comes to their press resistance and ball carrying, however I think both still need to develop their incisive and creative passing from deep, whereas Palacios is already an elite level progressive passer, alongside I would say having better defensive qualities than both Mainu and Neves as well. I think Mainu and Neves for their age are fantastic defensively, with Neves in particular being a ball recovery machine. However, for me, Palacios' aggression, tenacity, power and slide tackling ability makes him better suited to playing in the rest defence, and all round being a better defensive asset when it comes to halting counter-attacks, with his recovery slide tackles being as good as Amadou Onana's. And I think in terms of Mainu, Palacios allows him to be given a bit more offensive freedom than playing alongside Neves would. Palacios is also a few years older than Neves, being 25, and that is reflected in his play, with the Argentine being a bit more reliable in terms of his consistency, but also being significantly cheaper, likely around £60 million, whereas Neves could cost anything from £85 to £104 million, which is his release clause. So if it's not Joao Neves, who would be the final piece in my midfield puzzle as my first option, and a player who essentially would be the direct replacement for Bruno Fernandes, in terms of spending the money that his transfer would bring in? Well, for me it would have to be Bruno Guimaraes. Guimaraes is already one of the most complete central midfielders in the Premier League, as seen as this season he is simultaneously ranked in the 87th percentile for his non-penalty goals, the 81st for his XG assisted, the early 90th percentiles for his overall progressive passes and passes into the final third, whilst also ranking in the low to mid 90s for the amount of switches and through balls he completes. And that's just his goal creation and progressive passing, as he also ranks between the 70th to 75th percentile range for the amount of dribblers he has tackled, as well as the percentage of dribblers he's tackled as well, alongside sitting in the 92nd percentile for his successful take-ons and around the 80th percentile for his carries into the final third and penalty area, showing statistically that Guimaraes excels in almost every area. In a midfield three with Mainu and Palacios, you'd have three central midfielders who can rotate seamlessly, with all three being comfortable at dropping into the defensive third third during the build-up phase, whilst also having the necessary creativity, incisive passing and ball carrying ability to give United significant ball progression both in the transition and against deep defensive blocks. Out of possession with Palacios as the deep single pivot, both Guimaraes and Mainu can perform their role of dropping back when the ball is out wide, as both players are very good at reading the game and positioning themselves to intercept low crosses into the box. But with Palacios, Guimaraes and Mainu, you're getting one of the best deeper line playmakers in the world, as well as athletic and technically gifted box-to-box midfielders who can provide output in the final third just as much as in the middle and the defensive thirds during the build-up phase. Now in another video I am going to go into further depth about how this midfield would set up in different phases of play, so make sure you subscribe to the channel for that video. But for the rest of this video I'm just going to explain further my decision as to why I'd prefer Palacios and Guimaraes to Neves. But before I get into that, if you do want to check out my transfer podcast, you can go on my Patreon, it will be linked in the description, and you can get a 7-day free trial. So it's not that I don't rate Joao Neves, as I actually think he's one of the best central midfield options on the market. And if either Palacios or Bruno Guimaraes weren't attainable, and Neves was for under £85 million, and I'd definitely sign him for United, as I do think he's a level above even the likes of Amadou Onana, Adam Walton and Joey Verman, who are three players who I also rate incredibly highly. But purely from a stylistic point of view, I just think a midfield three of Palacios, Mainu and Guimaraes provides a bit more balance, and with Neves in there for either of the other two alongside Mainu. And this is because I think Neves and Mainu both excel in the same areas, but also need developing in the same areas as well. See, Mainu and Neves both excel in terms of covering ground, reading the game defensively, receiving the ball under pressure, ball circulation and carrying the ball into space. However, I do feel like Palacios would provide much greater ball progression against deep defensive blocks, with the Argentine having the type of incisive passing and vision, which I think could be a game changer for United when they come up against sides who sit in a deep defensive block and challenge United to break them down. Now don't get me wrong, Mainu and Neves aren't exactly poor when it comes to their progressive and incisive passing, but Palacios in my opinion has world-class ability when it comes to this particular area, whilst also having the defensive and athletic capabilities that makes Neves so unique as well. And even though his ball carrying isn't as good as Neves, Mainu does have this ability, which I think would work well alongside Palacios' passing. But for me, in terms of dropping £85 to £105 million on a central midfielder, my first choice would be Guimaraes, not just because he's a complete central midfielder like Neves, is Premier League proven, and is a player who I wanted United to sign even whilst he was at Lyon. And if I can find that video from a few years ago where I do analyse Guimaraes, then I'll add it on to the end of this video just so you can see what I was saying about Guimaraes even before he moved to Newcastle. But alongside all of these reasons, I think Guimaraes would be able to replace the creativity that would be lost with Bruno Fernandes' departure, that I don't think Mainu and Neves can do to the same level consistently throughout the season at this stage in their developments. And there are two great examples of this, with both being in different phases of play. The first is very reminiscent of Bruno Fernandes on the transition in the middle third against Manchester City, where the ball gets played square into Guimaraes, who has already seen Isaac making the run into the space down the left side. And so without even having to take a second glance, he plays a Bruno Fernandes-esque curling first time long pass, releasing Isaac in behind Kyle Walker from where he's able to finish, giving Guimaraes a well-deserved assist. But in this example against Wolves, we see Guimaraes show his creativity, this time in the final third against a low compact block, as he first has the ball control and trickery to spin out of an oncoming challenge, and then see the run in behind Bueno, the Wolves left back, and float a perfectly weighted ball in behind for Almiron, creating the 1v1 opportunity. Now before I show you the clip of my analysis of Guimaraes from a few years ago, let me just summarise my viewpoint on Neves. I do rate him incredibly highly, as his complete skill set makes him a valuable asset for elite level sides. However, the price tag and release clause is massively inflated for his current ability, which is why I'd prefer Ezequiel Palacios if there weren't any underlying injury issues, or even Maxence Caqueret, who I do think is very stylistically similar to Neves and currently performing at a similar level. Ten Hag's staying has reduced my optimism on Palacios, as the risk from Ten Hag's increased intensity both on the pitch and in training could reignite his injury issues, and so I'd probably go with Amadou Onana or Maxence Caqueret instead. So my secondary option to my main option is going to be Maxence Caqueret of Lyon, who's 21, 22 in February and has just 1 year left on his contract come the summer, which means I think he'll be available for between 20 and 25 million pounds, maybe 30 million pounds because it is Manchester United. But still, for his ability, he's an absolute bargain. Now, he was a player I said reminds me of Marco Verratti, and if you do watch him play, you'll see what I mean. He has that diminutive stature, and on the ball, he's one of the most aesthetically pleasing players currently in Europe right now. When he receives the ball under pressure in the defensive third, he's almost silky in the way he's able to manoeuvre his body, swivel and then drive past the opposition player, breaking the pressing lines, which is an absolute vital skill for any side really nowadays, as most sides do look to press you aggressively. So if you can have a player like Caqueret in your side, dropping deep to the edge of the box, you can play the pass into him, allow them to swivel past their player, and immediately you've broken through the whole opposition's pressing line, and this allows you to drive forward into the middle third. And right now, this is something that United desperately lack, as both Fred and McTominay, when they receive the ball, they don't really have this ability to swivel past a player. So Caqueret would instantly bring this ability to the Manchester United midfield. But also like Marco Verratti, he's excellent at these short pass interplays when under pressure in congested areas in the centre of midfield, which is another thing that Fred and McTominay lack, and this is going to mean that United can play around a press in the middle third, and Caqueret also has the ability to play incisive passes and long passes, which, as I said for Neves, is going to enable his side to progress the ball into the final third a lot more often. But the reason I like Caqueret so much is that he's not just a deep lying creator, he's also excellent defensively. So he doesn't look like a physical presence, only being 5'7", but he's a fantastic reader of the game. He's able to see when a pass is about to be played and adjust his body to make the interception, knowing exactly how to position himself in the midfield line to cut off a pass in behind him. And in the press, he's fantastic at moving out of the midfield line to apply pressure to a deeper opposition player. And this sort of reading of the game and pressing ability is absolutely vital for a counter-pressing side, and this will immediately make Manchester United's pressing from central midfield better, allowing United to win the ball higher up the pitch, which obviously can then be used as an offensive weapon. And you can see just how good he is defensively by looking at his FBref report. He ranks in the 97th percentile for pressures, the 94th for tackles, and the 78th for interceptions, which are absolutely phenomenal numbers, particularly for a player who isn't a sole ball winner. We can also see that he ranks in the 88th percentile for dribbles, the 89th for progressive passes, and the 80th for shot creating actions, showcasing the creativity that Caqueret would bring to the Manchester United midfield. But my main creative central midfielder target for Manchester United would be Caqueret's Lyon teammate, Bruno Guimaraes. I spoke about Guimaraes as a potential Paul Pogba replacement a couple of months ago, and I actually think right now he's one of the best central midfielders in Europe. He only turned 24 in November and has a contract at Lyon until 2024, meaning that he'd probably be available this summer for between 30 and 40 million pounds. Guimaraes was a player that I said reminds me of Steven Gerrard, and that's because he's an all-round central midfielder. He's fantastic defensively in central midfield, having the body positioning and technique to put in standing tackles in central midfield to break up the play, whilst also having the aggression to move out of the midfield line to apply pressure to an opposition player. And whilst I don't think his reading of the game and ability to make interceptions is as good as Caqueret, the reason I prefer the Brazilian to the Frenchman is because I think Guimaraes is a better creative player in the opposition's half. He's able to pick the ball up in central midfield, and he has the vision and passing ability to play through passes in behind the opposition's backline to find attacking runners, and he's great at playing long passes over the top of the backline as well. But also he can make runs forward into the box as well, and he's a very good finisher as well. He reminds me a lot of Aaron Ramsey when he makes these late runs beyond the striker into goal scoring positions. And overall, I do think he has the technical and creative ability of an advanced midfielder who likely would play further up the pitch, but his tackling ability means he's a vital part of the defensive unit in central midfield, which is why he's a perfect all-round central midfielder. And whilst reminding me of Steven Gerrard, he also reminds me of a prime Arturo Vidal, who was excellent at pretty much everything in central midfield, with Vidal and Guimaraes being excellent at getting back to help defensively, being excellent pressurers, having great aggression, whilst also being excellent in terms of their press resistance, forward passing, and their goal scoring ability in the final third. So Guimaraes is pretty much an all-round central midfielder, and I think he'd be perfect in that combative central midfield double pivot of Manchester United, with his defensive ability suiting a counter-pressing style. And in possession, when United win the ball back, he's going to be looking for those quick vertical passes, either to players in between the midfield and defensive lines, or in behind the back line, and this is crucial for transitioning the attack quickly, which is what United are currently lacking.